Hey, welcome back to the EOTECH channel. Today we are talking about lights and how they relate to optics, shooting in low and no light situations, and why you see lights on everyone's guns on Instagram. Primarily to look cool, because that's what you're supposed to do on Instagram. No, actually it's for a very good purpose, and it can kind of be summed up in a sentence. You cannot shoot, or you should not shoot, what you cannot see. Again, as civilians, we have a responsibility to take responsible shots, no matter what we're doing, whether that's on the range practicing, hunting, or in a defensive life situation. You have a responsibility to only shoot what you can positively identify as what you are supposed to be shooting given your situation. In order to do that in low and no light situations, you need either image intensification, night vision, or you need a white light. There are a ton of different white lights out there on the market, some better, some worse, and they're going to work a little bit differently with optics than they are going to with iron sights, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. So come along on this fun sciencey journey, and I'll try to make some jokes along the way to keep you interested. All right, let's start off with handguns. So handguns are the thing that most civilians are going to carry most commonly, and hopefully you're carrying one every day, and hopefully you have an E-Flex on it because you're a classy person and you buy good stuff. Now, assuming that you have your handgun with your red dot on it, you've also put a white light on it, a quality one. Here we see this is a Streamlight TLR1 HL, and like I said, all these different manufacturers have a lot of different models. They all have slightly different characteristics. We're not diving deep into all that. You can check all that out on their website. But the point is that you are probably going to be out and about or in your home at a time in which the sun will be going down or is all the way down, and you're going to have different lighting conditions. So what you want to do is keep in mind that this is going to project visible light, which will then be seen by the cones and rods in your eye, and that is going to give you information downrange. Now, classically, when we were shooting with pistols and iron sights, you had to deal with the fact that probably all the light was coming off the front of your gun. You had no or some mixed lighting around you, and that was going to make it really hard to see your iron sights and especially get what we refer to as proper sight alignment. The front sight vertically and horizontally aligned in the rear sight aperture. However, not the case with red dots, and especially not the case with the E-Flex because of the nice big window size. You get a ton of light transmission through very clear glass. You've got a nice bright dot, and all you have to do then is look down range, be target focus, put the dot where you want the bullet to go, and execute the fundamentals. So that's sort of the basics of shooting under white light. However, there's a lot of other stuff to consider. You could have other lighting conditions like street lights, vehicle lights, somebody else with a flashlight, all kinds of situations in which your white light on the gun is going to have to project through what are called photonic barriers. Basically, it's competing sources of light. If you've ever pulled up to a stoplight or something like that, or a stop sign, and someone else has got their high beams on, you've got your beams on, but they're not quite as bright, you know it can seem brighter to you than it probably does to them. Same situation applies when you're shooting. Also applies for reflective surfaces. If you are, say, in your home and you've got white light, white walls, or perhaps you go into a room with a mirror like your bathroom or a bedroom or something, that's going to reflect light as well. So not only do you have to keep that in mind for situational awareness and not blinding yourself, but also that can wash out your dot or make your irons very hard to see. But again, we're talking about shooting with dots because you bought an E-Flex. What does that mean? That means that you need to get out there and practice a little bit and see what kind of brightness settings work for you. And why I say for you is because how well you see at night is going to depend on your age, your genetics, and your overall health. All of those things matter. So different people will have different brightness settings that are going to work best for them with different lighting conditions. And I know that seems kind of vague, but honestly, it is kind of down to you to get out and try it out and see what works best for you. And again, you'll be surprised. The first time you put up a nice white target and you're 5 yards away and you turn your super bright light on and you're like, boom, wow. A lot of light came back to you and that reflected in your eyes, and if you weren't ready for that and you're not prepared for that, you've never practiced that before, if you're in a high stress situation, that could affect your accuracy, which can have many different kinds of detrimental effects. That's super high level shooting with pistols. Again, guys, this is a very deep topic, almost as deep as night vision, and so I do encourage you to seek more information. There's a ton of good resources out there for this kind of stuff, but again, we're going over some high level considerations for shooting with white light. Keep in mind, before I move on to rifles, that just like we see here with this super nice staccato, there are different size white lights for handguns. So there's subcompact, compact, and full-size weapon lights. And again, they're all going to have different features. And as technology gets better, we're seeing brighter and brighter lights in all different sort of sizes of light and for different size handguns. Lots of good holster manufacturers out there supporting holsters for this. So you're not limited barely by technology or options anymore. It's just up to you to pick what's best. Now, before I move on to rifle lights, I do want to really quickly touch on candela and lumens. So lumens is going to be the perceived brightness of the actual light itself, and that's why you'll see 1,000 lumen out there all the time with lights. However, candela is going to talk about the wavelength of light and how that light actually projects and is thrown, and it means how far it's going to go. And again, how well you perceive that as an individual is going to depend on your overall eye health. However, these are things you have to balance. So when you're looking at your lights to select for purchasing, don't just look at lumens. Both matter. Candela typically is going to matter more. If you are in a situation where you may need to use your handgun like a duty use, it can be very important for cops where they're going to be maybe taking longer shots, or at least needing to identify things at longer ranges. Think if they're doing like responding to an alarm or something in a warehouse, there's bigger spaces, not typically applying on our homes, as well as for rifles, when obviously you have much more range capability with a rifle. So do keep in mind you want to pay attention to both lumens and candela, and again, that is barely even wave tops for that topic, but we're going to move on. So next we come to rifles. So with rifles, you do want to keep in mind it's not just the actual light itself and the performance, but how you mount it to your rifle, as well as your switchology or your power authority. Now, power authority matters for handguns, but you've only got a couple of options. Typically, you're going to have a press or a toggle switch, and you're going to have to compromise your grip in a certain way to activate that, generally speaking, and that just kind of is what it is. However, that is not the case with rifles. We've got buttons here on the tail caps. We've got all kinds of cool buttons and switches you can put on your rifle. And so what you want to keep in mind there is that you want to set this gun up to be as user-friendly, or have the best biomechanical kinesthetic interface, if you want to use all those cool sciencey words for the cool SEO, to set this rifle up to work for you. So as you can see here, we've set this up so that I have the switch to activate the white light right here, and right behind it is the switch to activate the laser. And I can put my thumb there, and I'm going to leave it there all the time when I'm shooting, right? So I can mount the rifle, I can shoot during the daytime, just like that. I've got nods on, I can shoot through the optic passive, no problem. I can activate the laser with my thumb here, and the white light right there. And I don't move my hand at all. And that means that I have a consistent grip that I'm shooting with all the time, thus reducing the number of reps it takes to train on the platform, but also making sure that you always know where your buttons are, especially if it is dark and you can't necessarily see what's going on around you. Quick note there on power authority with your button placement, but it is something to keep in mind when you're setting up your gun. Next, you want to talk about the light placement itself on the rifle. So as you can see here, the suppressor extends in front of the rifle. Now what that's going to do is cause a shadow. So when we turn the light on, you can see that the light's highlighting the side of the suppressor here, and that's going to cause a shadow over to the left. Same thing if you put it on the right, top or bottom, it doesn't matter. Unless there is nothing in front of the rifle, like you see here with handguns, which is why I didn't mention it there, you're going to get some shadowing. What that can cause is a lack of situational awareness on the side of the shadow, if you're not keeping that in mind. So this is where searching and assessing really comes into play with low light and no light shooting. When you're shooting with white lights, driving that gun around. Downside there is you are pointing a gun at stuff. So you're looking, right? And because you're trying to, observe your surroundings, but you're also pointing a gun at things. So you have to be careful. And that's where you start taking into account things like bounce. And basically what that is if, say for instance, I was to pick this gun up and shine at the table, you can see it's reflecting onto my face here, right? You can do that in indoor situations or other reflective surfaces where you're not necessarily pointing your gun at something that could be potentially bad. You don't know because you haven't identified it yet. You can point it at a reflective surface to highlight the general area and give an umbrella or bloom effect. And again, lots more to talk about there we're not going to get into, but it's something to keep in mind when you're setting up your gun. Keep in mind if you're going to have something in front of the light, it's going to cause a shadow, and you just want to take that into consideration. Finally, we're going to talk about how the light is going to move through the optic. Now, you've lucked out. You put an HWS on your rifle. Good choice on your part, because not only is it one of the biggest windows, but it's got absolutely crystal clear glass. And that means that as much light as possible that is going to reflect back into your eyes is also going to be coming through that optic. So not just when you're over top of the rifle searching and assessing, but when you're actually aiming in, you're getting a ton of information through that optic, and it's super bright. So you're not going to have your optic washed out by the light that's either around you or that you're projecting down range. However, like I said with the pistols, it does take a little bit of practice. So please try to get out there. I know it can be restrictive in different areas, indoor ranges or noise ordinances, that kind of stuff. But if you have the ability, please, and you've got a light in your gun, take the time to get out and shoot at least a little bit as the sun's going down or after dark, so you could see what that's like. Again, this is why we've got all kinds of different brightness settings on all of our optics so that you can dial it in for you. Last thing we're going to talk about, or second last thing really, is LPVOs and white light shooting. One of the biggest benefits to being able to have an offset red dot is you're trying to skip the whole LPVO white light thing. So if you can do it and you can afford it, definitely do it. It's a great option. Keep in mind, these lights aren't going that far, and we started off by talking about what you can responsibly see is what you can shoot. Most likely, rifle lights are not going to project at a distance to give you positive target identification beyond what you can confidently hit with your red dot anyway. However, there are some super bright lights out there that will push out pretty far, or maybe you don't have a red dot, you just have a magnified optic. Couple things to keep in mind. You're going to have a slight reduction in light transmission as you go through multiple planes of glass. That's just how physics works. However, it is magnifying the image and getting you more information downrange. That's why we have magnified optics in the first place. So everything in life is a trade-off. Physics is a thing and it always applies. So this is really where I'm going to stress. Get out there and feel it out and train on this as much as you can because one, you're going to have to deal with the decrease in situational awareness as you look through the glass itself, through the optic. Your field of view is collapsing in. And two, you need to remember to activate your illuminated reticle. Again, this is why we have these things. If you do not have your illuminated reticle or you have not turned on your reticle, it can be really hard, especially if you have multiple stadia lines inside your reticle or some of the more complex reticles out there, to see some of that as you move away from the optical center line of the LPVO. Now, again, you're probably having it at pretty low power. And again, if you've got a Voodoo, you've got super clear glass, so these problems are reduced, but you can't ever get away from physics. So, all that being said, yes, you want to get out there and train, but also keep in mind you probably want to have your LPVOs dialed as far down as you can responsibly and reasonably do for the shot you have to take. And if you have an illuminated reticle, please turn it on because that's really going to help the reticle stand out against the background and all the competing sources of light that are coming into your eyes and the optic. Finally, we're going to mention this thing right here. Now, this is the Genesis 12. It's amazing and it's awesome and it's it's probably my favorite 12 gauge ever. And why do we have a white light on this gun? Well, one, it's awesome. Two, it matches. But really, more importantly, this is an extremely versatile tool. For years, myself and many people have really leaned into pistols, pistol caliber carbines, or especially intermediate caliber rifles for home defense as a superior option. And the Genesis 12 is the first thing that sort of changed that. Now, you're not going to get away from the over-penetration of slugs and the power of buckshot, especially in commercial construction. However, this is a new kind of gun that is bringing all kinds of versatility back to the 12 gauge platform. And so it's something you may reasonably consider. And if you're going to do that, then why not throw a white light on this thing along with an HWS and the drum mag? Because, come on, this is awesome. Yeah, I mean, come on, right? Yeah. But guys, in all seriousness, as 12 gauges evolve and the platform grows, different rounds are out there, this is gaining not just popularity, but also a reasonable re-inclusion into the civilian and law enforcement market for multiple uses. And again, anything you're going to use to defend yourself or others or hunt with, then you definitely want to make sure you're always being responsible with that platform. And so just like anything else here on the table, if you're running a shotgun for those uses, throw a light on it. You want to do the right thing, you want to do the responsible thing, and you're worth the investment. As always, guys, like I say, gear is awesome, training matters, so take the time, invest in yourself, invest in good gear, invest in training. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any comments, questions, please do put those below. Let me know all the things I got wrong because we appreciate the engagement. Train hard, live free. See you next time.